The 2006 NBA Finals are considered one of the best performances individually in NBA history. We saw this as Miami Heat fans. Lou, I'm gonna go to you first. I know you're a little younger than I am. What do you remember from that series?
To be very honest, all I remember is Dwyane Wade and one. Dwyane Wade, the foul, and he gets it to go. Like, it was not realistically. That was my first, I want to say my first introduction to like that level of euphoria basketball has been giving me ever since 06. But that was my first taste of it. And it was like that's when the addiction started. And all thanks to Dwyane Wade. Like, it was genuinely just thanks to that man. What he was able to put on in those finals. All I can remember is just big shot after big shot, close game after close game. It was one of the few finals where I felt like almost every game like was just right there within grasp up until maybe the last couple of minutes. And just an absolute, obviously as a Heat fan, just an absolute amazing finals. I mean, I don't think you got to be a Heat fan. I think everybody but Dallas Mavericks fans will say that realistically. But just, again, man, like literally a historic performance.
So for me personally, I was 13 years old at the time. So I was a little older. I had been watching basketball for maybe 3 years at that point. And so I had already been, and Dwyane Wade was already my favorite player by that point. I think a lot of people who are not from Miami just wouldn't really know how the city felt going into that season, because he was coming off of the 04-05 season where he, I wouldn't say broke out, because he broke out really in his rookie year playoffs. But 04-05, him and Shaq were this huge deal. And because they had a season under their belt. And 04-05, Shaq, Wade averaged 24.5 points per game, I believe. So he was basically right there on the cusp of being a superstar. And all of us felt it. Me and all my little middle school friends felt it. He had his shoe coming out. That was a big deal. He had those commercials in black and white. The older audience may remember, for Converse. Yep. Dwyane Wade was right on the cusp of becoming a superstar. And that season, he showed flashes of superstardom. It was still within the context of the duo of him and Shaq. But he had games throughout the season where he took over. Like, he took over once against Detroit. I believe it wasn't a Christmas game, but it was near around that time. I remember just because how the weather was in Miami. He done it multiple times. In that playoff series itself, he had done it a few. That playoff run itself, I mean, he had done it a few times. I think that's the same year he shaved his head bald going against Chicago, who early in his career, he would go into Chicago and never play well. So when they got Chicago in the first round, I was a little worried because he would go to Chicago and he would be terrible for some reason. But going into the finals, a lot of people also don't remember just how good those Mavericks teams were, how dominant Dirk Nowitzki was. So I'm going to be completely honest. When the Heat went down 0-2, I was not surprised at all. I was like, man, you know what? This might be over. Like, it's Mavs year to deserve it. But in the back of my mind, I had just seen D-Wade for the past 2 years take over these games, and he'll give you 20 in the fourth quarter. And you kind of got to the point where at that time, if the Heat were down double digits with 5 minutes left, you still didn't feel like it was over. It felt kind of like today does, where a team with a big lead doesn't necessarily mean anything until the game is over.
Yep.
It wasn't like that often back then, but with D-Wade on the other side, it kind of was. And so I didn't know if he could hold that up for a full series. I knew he could probably give them a game, and he did in game 3, but I didn't know if he could do it for a full series. And man, I was wrong as hell.
Yeah, no, for that series just against the Mavs, put up almost 35 points a game, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 steals, and 1 block a game. So it's, the numbers that stick out, probably the 35, but the 3 steals, 1 block per game, doing it on both ends against, like you said, a very good team with, Shaq was practically on his last, that was practically his last.
He was very bad that series.
Yeah, he wasn't even the second leading scorer, as we've stated previously, but just Dwyane literally being able to will his team to victory during that 06 finals was something literally truly spectacular. one of the few players in NBA history that has won a Finals MVP during the duration of their rookie contract.
Mm-hmm.
So that just goes to show how good he was that early in his career at 24 years old at the time to win a Finals MVP was not something that was common back then. It's not something that's common right now, like, to be very honest. It was just, but like you said, he was just the clear-cut guy, it felt like, just about every game. After they went down 0-2, what does he do game 3? He comes back, puts up 42 and 13 to will the team to a 2-point win. Literally, that game without Dwyane Wade, it's donezo. Like, Dallas Mavericks is holding up the, it's 3-0. Yeah, there's technically a chance, but no team has ever came back from 3-0. So, it was literally, that was the difference in the series when basically the season was on the line. He came back and he just, like, generally, he just delivered. Like,
yeah.
Like, nobody had, it was seriously just tough.
And the Mavs, they had defenders. There was just nothing. Like, Marquise Daniels was a great defender. There was nothing he could do. There was nothing he could do. And I also understand Dwyane Wade shot a lot of free throws, and I get it. I live in Dallas now. I hear all they gave him a championship, the referees this, referees that. But if you go back and watch those games, he really was getting fouled. Like, you wouldn't be able to show me a play where there was a phantom call. And I've had this debate online and in person, whatever it is. Show me a phantom call. And there just was none. He was just so good already. I won't even, because there wasn't a whole lot of back then just finessing your way into getting fouled. It was just pure aggression. It was just pure to the basket. And we'll get to his skill set in a second. But at that age, at that time, 13 years old, I had never seen anything like that in a playoff series. And to this day, I still don't know if I have.
Yep. I was going to say, I have it now. Like, that level of athleticism, man, the level of aggression, like you stated, 16 free throws a game that series, like, earned too. Like, you can say what you want, you can hate if you want, but like, he genuinely, in an era with no spacing, because at the time, the Heat were playing Shaq and Udonis Haslem together, Antoine Walker. None of those three guys could really shoot that well, if we're being very honest. And Wade wasn't really a shooter either. Again, this was an era where shooting wasn't as coveted as it is nowadays, but the Mavericks did have some of those shooters. They did have some of that spacing. And Wade was just still, like, relentless. Like, it felt like it was the most, I don't know. I feel like it spoiled us, to be very honest, to have somebody that good early on in our career. And now everybody is held to that standard. And to be honest, most people don't come close. So it's just. Right.
I got lucky because I watched a year of Heat basketball in general, but a lot of Heat basketball also the year before Dwyane got drafted. And so I saw how bad it could get. At the time, Alonzo Mourning was in, I like to forget this era, but it happened. Alonzo Mourning was playing for the New Jersey Nets at the time. The Heat had Brian Grant, who I really liked. They had Caron Butler, who I was excited about. Rasul Butler, rest in peace. I was excited about him, but the team overall just wasn't good. And then they draft Dwyane Wade, and the rest was history. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Playoff Foul. I'm Kenny. We don't have Frankie today with us. He has some stuff to do, but I do have Lou. Lou, how you doing today?
Oh, man, it's like Christmas, man. We're talking about my favorite player, man, so I got to be fantastic.
All right, and so before we even get into it, make sure you subscribe wherever if it's audio, subscribe on whether it's Spotify, Apple, wherever. If it's video, subscribe to the YouTube. We've gotten subscribers pretty consistently there. Just keep it going. And we just going to go ahead and get into it. Once a month, we're going to be paying homage to a player, an NBA legend. First month was LeBron James. Second month, we did Kobe Bryant. Month number 3, it only makes sense for us to go with Dwyane Wade. especially being Miami Heat fans, growing up, watching them, idolizing them, all that stuff. We had to get this out the way at some point. To be honest, we tried to a month before, some stuff we wanted to guess, it didn't happen. Doesn't matter. Dwyane Wade. We never have and may never see another player like this again. As far as the skill set, we're talking about somebody who is 6'4", barely, probably not even 6'4", because back then they weren't using real heights.
Yeah, it was with the shoes on.
With the shoes on. At shooting guard, blocking 7-footers dunks routinely. All-time leader in blocks at the guard position at 885. He beat Jordan by like 50-something. But I'll say once again, most likely under 6'4". Talk about that defensively. When you talk about on offense, being able to split double teams the way he did. And I'll watch these old D-Wade games, and it's not only just the splitting the double teams. It's splitting a double team, the help comes, you in and out him, and now you in the air about to dunk on the center. We don't see John Morant does it sometimes. John Morant is very good at splitting double teams, but aside from that, it's that combination of things we really don't see anymore.
Yeah, it's very rare. There's probably just a handful of guys who can split doubles. Jaw's one of them. It's a great great call. I think Mitchell's another one. Ironically, he reminded me a lot of Wade offensively coming out of Louisville. So it's literally, you can tell when he came out and he was like, yeah, this has been my idol. Like, shit, it fucking makes sense. Like, a bunch of players have modeled their game after Dwyane Wade. A bunch of people have been paying homage to him recently, and rightfully so, because, in an era where, after Jordan, we had Kobe, and then it was really Kobe and Wade for a long time there at that 2-guard spot, just manning the way. He truly sensational. Like you said, his ability to generally make something out of nothing, just about every time, whenever he wanted, was insane. Once he got to the launching pad, it was game over. Wrap it up. Yeah, just count up to 2 points, or if you're going to stop him, you're going to foul him. And even if you foul him, he might still get an and one. Like it really might not matter. Just that level of relentlessness is honestly the best way I could describe it. And it really started in Marquette.
Yeah.
It really started in Marquette, to be very honest. He was, obviously playing in Marquette. He really got his name out there, obviously, during the March Madness. Yeah. And, I believe that was the first game he later came out on record. That was the first game his dad ever went to go see him. Or maybe his mom. Sorry. Yeah. The first game his mom had ever went to go see him. And what did he do? He just happened to beat what was the favorites at the time, put up like a 30-point triple-double. Just had the it factor, man. Like some shit you just can't teach. And he had it. In Spanish, we call that cojones. He had that. Like for sure he had that. And just, ever since that moment, I want to thank every team for passing up on him. The first, obviously, Cleveland, you did your thing, obviously. You got the pick right. But, Detroit and, crazy story. I don't know if you saw it on the Mellow podcast. Basically talking about how Dwyane had gotten a verbal commitment from the Nuggets.
Yeah. If
Carmelo went to that, he was going to be third to Denver. And it's just a crazy what if, one that I don't want to imagine too much, but little nuances like that. Cause Pat Riley obviously wasn't the guy he wanted.
Pat Riley wanted Chris Kaman. Yeah. Oh, something else too. Cause a while ago, usually around the draft, I don't know if they still do it, but NBA TV will show old drafts. And I don't know how true this is. It was a rumor at the time. The Heat were looking for a big real bad, right? They had this 5th pick. And this is something you want to get into in a later episode, like the value of picks. This is a great example of one. The Heat had this 5th pick, but they really wanted a big. These fools allegedly were about to trade the 5th pick, which was just a pick at the time, for Kwame Brown. Because Kwame, he didn't pan out, but he had tools. He was athletic. He could block shots. And if I'm not mistaken, his rookie year probably wasn't even that bad. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But Can you imagine? I don't want to imagine that.
Yeah.
We mentioned Dwyane Wade's height, 6'4", maybe, but we doubt it. You had some stuff about him dunking, some numbers on him on his dunks.
So a lot of people want to talk about like the level of athleticism, and they bring up people, rightfully so, John Morant, Russell Westbrook, Derrick Rose, especially during his MVP season. Dwyane Wade doesn't nearly get mentioned as much as he should, in my opinion.
Right.
During that 2005-2006 season, he had 152 dunks. For those of you who do not know what that means, he played 75 games. He was dunking the ball over 2 times per game at 6'3", 6'4", in an era with negative spacing. Go back and watch the tape. It was negative spacing. John Morant dunked the ball the most in his career, 58 times. Sorry. Russell Westbrook, 69 times. So you mean to tell me you add both of those guys up? Oh, let's throw in Derrick Rose 32 times for a grand total of 159 times, while Dwyane Wade did it 152 times by himself. Just puts into perspective, generally, the level of athleticism, the level of in and out ability, like just his euros, his spins, just his way of getting into the lane. And once he got there, it was, like we said, it was raps. And from a player who's 6'3", we just talked about him, one of the best dunkers, your favorite in-game dunker of your generation, LeBron James, dunked the ball 145 times, still 7 times less than Dwyane Wade did in more games as his peak. Like, this is the level of athlete we are talking about here. And it's just, he was truly special to watch. Besides just the dunks, the greatest highlight mixtape ever.
Oh yeah.
If you're from Miami, if you're anywhere that has to do from Florida, you know about the Clinic. If you're an NBA fan, you know about the Clinic highlight tape. And if you do not, please do yourself a favor. Go back. Hopefully it's still on YouTube. I haven't looked at it in a while, but it was by far the most hype mixtape I had ever seen. Just the amount of jaw-dropping plays. It looks like it's a whole, I don't even know, like, it looks like it should be somebody's whole career, but really it was like 9-10 years. Like, that's how crazy he was. Like, yeah, truly special.
And I actually saw it from his rookie year because I was watching that draft. I'm aging myself. I'll say my actual age. I'm 31 years old, but I was watching that draft, and I've said this off air before. I might have said it on there. I don't even remember. I was already all in on basketball at that time. That draft happened. I was still 10 years old. Eddie Jones had just come off a season where he averaged 18 points per game. He was a two-way player. I like the idea of Dwyane Wade, but he was a shooting guard. I didn't think it made sense. I really wanted TJ Ford in that draft, just to be honest with you. TJ Ford was real fast. We had a great career over at Texas. But they drafted Dwyane Wade. They showed the highlights. I was like, oh, hold on. They finished the highlights. And they showed the player comparison. It said Steve Francis. I was like, you know what? I'm all in. And from that point on, his rookie year, it was just like multiple, like, he had one of those rookie years, and a lot of people weren't watching at the time because the Heat were, to this day, they don't get the national attention they probably should, even when they're good. But they weren't good the first half of the season. Ironically enough, Dwyane Wade was a person, once again, who was like, no, we're not going to keep losing like this. And he willed them into the playoff run in the second half of the season as a rookie. Yep. But I say all that to say, his rookie year, he was one of those players similar to a John Morant now, similar to a Derrick Rose when he first came into the league. He'll just give you a highlight, something you've never seen before every game, if not multiple times a game. Just between the crossovers, the dunks, it was just all just filthy. And then he goes into the playoff series against the Hornets, against Baron Davis, one of my favorite players, really still, but definitely back then. Also a good defender, underrated defender. Hits him with the game winner. Not a whole world knows D Wade. And that's the play Shaq saw. It was like, you know what? I want to play with him.
Maybe that's where I want to play next. Maybe he can assist my future endeavors in trying to win a championship.
And hey, go ahead.
And no, like you said, not just did they, beat New Orleans, they went the following round into Indy, who at the time was Like,
powerhouse. They didn't win a
yeah,
championship with that team, but that team was stacked.
yeah, it was a phenomenal team, and took them to 6 games as a rookie.
Mm-hmm.
Took them to 6 games after just like, practically like the level of talent that he had displayed at that time really put the world on notice, kind of like you said. So what did they do the following year? They make a blockbuster trade, which is crazy, because if they don't win a championship, that trade is that would be one of the worst trades in Heat history, considering all the talent that they went out there to give up for an aging Shaquille O'Neal.
Mm-hmm.
But they won the championship. But particularly the 04-05 season, I want to bring it up because prior to Dwyane Wade's broken rib against Detroit in the conference finals, they were up 3-1 and up 10 points at the end of the third quarter. They ended up losing that game and lost that series.
Yeah,
due to Dwyane Wade's injury.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to forget how good he was and how good the world knew he was. Not only that, but how consistent he was, because a lot of players, throughout the history, have come into the scene strong, and then their window closes.
Yeah,
he controlled his own window there for a little minute at 23, 24 years old. But had the bad boy Pistons had him, ropes against the ropes, basically waiting for the knockout punch, gets knocked out of the game, couldn't come back and return for that series, and the Heat couldn't edge out one more win against him. That was the level of talent that he had, considering the pieces that he had. Again, they weren't bad pieces, but he was buff. Like, he was the whole gas to the engine. Like, without him, they were going nowhere.
Yeah, and what I remember about that season, 04-05, was the hype around the team. I don't know about the rest of the nation. At that time, I really wasn't paying attention to the rest of the nation. I was just kind of all Miami Heat. I still watched other teams, obviously, but I remember the energy around that team, because the thing a lot of people don't remember is Shaq getting traded to the Heat happened almost exactly 2 weeks before Ricky Williams randomly left the NFL. And so the city of Miami made a complete shift by the time that season started. It's still a football city. I'm not going to sit there and lie to you, but not professionally. The Dolphins are good again, but at that time it was, all right, you know what? Let's see what this Miami Heat is about. Because I remember being in school before Dwyane Wade got drafted. It'll be like, because I'm all in on basketball. I got a couple like friends who like basketball, but sometimes it's like Ricky Williams just had however many yards yesterday. What the fuck is a T-Mac? What are you talking about right now?
Yeah.
D-Wade started going off, especially in the 04-05 season. It's a complete shift. it's a complete, like, because like I said before, he went from 16 points per game as a rookie, which is a pretty good rookie year, to 24 points per game as a sophomore, which is like, whoa, hold on. And he got Shaq right next to him. So now the national media is starting to come in, and it's this whole thing. And I'm in 6th grade at the time. No, 7th grade at the time. And it's just like all D-Wade at the school, when we go play at the park after school. If you're on a basketball team, it's everything is Dwyane Wade everywhere. Like I said before, the commercials, his billboards everywhere. He had his shoe out. Dwyane Wade had us buying Converse shoes.
Yep. My first basketball shoe ever was a Dwyane Wade Converse shoes. They were ugly.
Ugly as shit.
Ugly as shit, but it didn't matter because it said Dwyane Wade on them. Like, generally, like, it did not matter.
Like,
and uncomfortable too. The worst ball shoes.
They were terrible to play in. I don't want to sit there and roast Converse, but those were a bad shoe, but I needed them. And if my dad wanted to get me a second pair, I would have had more than one pair.
Yeah.
But I was to say the influence D-Wade had on Miami before they even won the championship was just major. I had never seen a basketball player getting that kind of attention in the city. It was all football, whether it was NFL. People also don't know outside of Miami, high school football is a huge deal.
Yep.
Optimist football outside of Miami, people call it Pop Warner, whatever it is. But that's probably a little toxic. That probably shouldn't be the way it is with, like, as far as the betting on it and all that stuff. But football is king in Miami. Those D-Wade years, especially that year, where the shift happened, I don't know.
Literally. And you didn't even mention UM, obviously. But
oh yeah, UM football definitely.
Like, UM, the Dolphins, like you said, Paul Warner, high school. It didn't really matter. But as soon as Dwyane Wade came onto the scene and the way he came onto the scene, everybody was like, damn, maybe we should pay attention to Miami Heat.
Yeah.
Because it had, like you said, it had been a minute since, Alonzo Mourning was at his peak. It had been obviously some time there. And, those teams performed well, but never really the team was still young is how I'll say it. They were probably about like 10 years into their tenure when Zoe and Tim started really, moving the wheels. But Dwyane took it to like a whole nother stratosphere that, to be honest, nobody had really taken it in Miami aside from like, the Dolphins back during their
like the 70s.
The 70s, I guess, yeah.
But after that season, Dwyane breaks his rib against the Pistons. And people talk about heartbreaking playoff losses. They talk about 2011. 2005 was kind of right there for me. Because they're probably not going to beat the Spurs that year, I'm going to be honest with you. But they probably would have given a better fight than the Pistons did. But I don't even want to really get into that.
Yeah,
that happens.
The Spurs probably would have won, to be very honest. But the Heat were 8-0 going into the they had not lost a game going into that Pistons series. And basically go out there, practically get punched in the mouth game one. They come back, win 2 straight. And it's like we're still here. Again, we're still here. The first 2 games they take 2 losses. Obviously, again, down. The first game they lose down 1-0. What does Dwyane Wade come back and do? Again, every time his back was against the wall, I don't know what
his whole career.
I don't know what animal is the most dangerous animal. It's just Dwyane Wade. He put up 40 that next game. Like he was like, not again, not today, man. And it was consistent just about every time throughout the beginning of his career.
And people don't remember how great that Pistons team was. Defending champions, first of all.
Yep.
But they had a historic defense. I don't know what the numbers are, but historic defense.
Yeah, 54-28 that year. Second best defense in basketball that year. Like just genuinely insane. Like an insane team. Obviously, Billups, basically the whole Bad Boys Pistons, like Ben Wallace, Tyshawn, Rasheed, Rip Hamilton, Darvin Ham. Like, you know who they had. Like they had been together for a while. They had been, honestly, to a certain extent, running the East for a while.
Yeah, for years.
So, and here comes along sophomore Dwyane Wade out of nowhere. At the
time, 23 years old.
Yeah, I don't want to say out of nowhere, but here comes a sophomore, basically drafted, second year out of the draft, just literally giving them as good a run for their money as they have had in the East up until that point.
Off season comes, and I really like that Heat team, but I guess Pat Riley saw something else. I felt like, hey, they were really close to the D Wade injury, but Pat Riley, you got to trust Pat Riley. So a lot of people don't remember the context of this, right? Eddie Jones was getting older, and he was kind of declining a little bit, and he was also a shooting guard. They needed to really find the fit with D Wade because it just kind of wasn't working. They had a great record. They were a great team, but they could have found a more easy fit. So Pat Riley goes ahead, and he did what Pat Riley does. Pat Riley usually goes after disgruntled players or players who were out there welcome in other places. He did this a bunch of different times in one offseason. So Jason Williams had won his welcome out in Memphis. They wanted nothing to do with him. He was in the media saying all kinds of stuff. It was bad.
Yep.
So they needed him out of Memphis. Antoine Walker had been back with the Boston Celtics, but their relationship had never healed from the first time they traded him because they did him kind of wrong. And so it was kind of rocky over there. They got James Posey from, I believe, Denver, who, if I'm not mistaken, wanted a bigger role at the time. Either that or I remember the Nuggets being pretty – No. 05 they had Melo. They were decent. But
they got him from Memphis as well.
They actually got him from Memphis.
Yeah.
Right. They did get him from Memphis, and he wanted a not bigger role, but that team was just bad. And he's the type of player you need on a contender. So they bring in those guys. I'm excited as hell going into the season. There are people who weren't because the team before was good. And at the time, like people don't remember, once again, like I'm saying, those other guys wore their welcome out in the places they were. Jason Williams wasn't exactly white chocolate anymore. He had always been sort of inefficient, but he ended up being, honestly, the most efficient he was in his career with Miami.
Yeah.
They bring these guys in. I remember maybe in a preseason game, Antoine Walker, and at the time, Antoine Walker was he could shoot by those days standards. Now, not necessarily, but
yeah.
I remember being excited about the spacing with him, and also one of the preseason games, he had like 16 rebounds. I was like, wait a minute, where did this come from? So they go into the season. They look like contenders for most of it. They go against the Mavs in the regular season, get beat by 36 points. I'm like, okay, there's probably a different level. Like I don't know if they're there yet. They go into the playoffs. They roll into the playoffs, get to the finals. Run into the Mavericks. I'm remembering that 36-point loss, and I'm like, this ain't going to be good. And then we talked in the beginning what ended up happening. But the feeling of seeing them win that championship, I'm going to go to you first because you were younger.
It was, like I said, man, euphoria. It was the first time in my I don't want to say it was the first time in my since I started watching basketball that I felt that kind of feeling, because if I'm being very honest, I was, I'm a Latin person, Cuban, baseball, 2003, Marlins won. Yeah. It was that same feeling just with basketball. And I would have never thought I would have ever felt like that. But it was religiously, I would go every single day to my aunt's house with my cousins because she was a huge Dwyane Wade fan to go watch the games. And that's when I started really falling in love. But once they won that championship, we went straight to 49th Street. If you're from Miami, like that's all I got to say. Straight to 49th Street, pots and pans, 8 years old, running up and down. We had a truck at the time. So it was everybody in the back of the truck waving jerseys, fireworks, like the sparklers. We had everything we didn't even know we had. And it was just the greatest, the most connected I felt like since 2003, because I was like 7 years old at that time when they won. But it was honestly a euphoric experience. And the way that it was done was the closest thing we've got into like a one-man show winning the finals.
Yeah.
And again, no shade to anybody else. Obviously, it's a team game, but he was the engine for this team. Yeah. And typically the engine at some point in time, it sputters or it runs out of gas. Not with Dwyane Wade that year.
So what I remember is Game 3 comeback happens. I'm still a little worried about it, but like I said in the beginning, I want to see if D-Wade can keep this up for a series. I'd seen him do it in games numerous times where he just takes over and there's nothing other team can do. Game 4, he does it again. Now it's a tied series. And you could kind of see most of the Mavs, not all of them, but a lot of the Mavs players looked a little kind of discouraged, I'm going to be honest with you.
Yep.
Aside from like Jerry Stackhouse, Jason Terry, but Dirk himself, he couldn't do nothing with Udonis Haslem. I don't care what anybody – people have the jokes about Udonis Haslem, whatever it is, but without his defense that series, the Heat probably still don't win.
Absolutely.
And so I started to feel like as long as UD can keep holding Dirk like this, the Heat might really do something. Then they win Game 5, and it's 3-2, and they're going back to Dallas. And I'm like, this might be over. And they actually went out and did it. And I don't even remember the feeling, to be honest with you, aside from like, I don't want to say shock, but it was something like it because I had never seen, because I'm not a baseball fan. Like the Marlins had won, I saw people celebrating, but I had no real connection to that.
Yeah.
But just, there was a feeling of multiple different things. One, I was a Heat fan before I knew what the NBA was. because at my preschool, like the Heat had done some community work. They were like around and stuff. So I'm a Heat fan since 4 years old. I've become this huge basketball fan. They draft D Wade. This is my favorite player, and this is like Shaq, Kobe era. This is like everybody's like, how's Dwyane Wade your favorite player? Like the first year, it's his rookie year I was sold. Second year, people started to kind of get it. There was also the Kobe factor of him and Shaq, who's going to win a championship without the other one first. And I'm on Shaq's side because I'm a Heat fan. No matter what it is, I don't care. I know Shaq was bad that series, but I had that agenda I was running with.
Yep.
And seeing them actually win it, I just, like I said, I can't even explain the feeling.
Yeah, and one of the crazy things was that Game 5 game went to overtime too. Like it was one of the, like I said, literally a nail biter. Like that, I remember the two, specifically like the two last games for them to win, which people say it's always the last ones that are more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's literally what it felt like. It felt like sometimes they were literally pulling teeth to try to get these wins, but like ridiculous that they did it in overtime, especially with somebody as young as Wade. And then obviously during the closeout game, we know what he did, just a slight 36 and 10 with 4 steals and like 3 blocks. Like just
and I'm glad you mentioned there were no easy games that series. Like I was just so anxious watching these games. Like I convinced myself at the time, like if I don't look at the TV while he's shooting free throws, the free throw will go in. Like just sports superstitions that I've never had before and never picked up again. Just like I remember like just being so into that series because the games just didn't allow anything else. It was just like everything was close. Like you mentioned that overtime game, there was comebacks, all kinds of like that heroic performance D Wade had to put on. It wasn't just, oh, I'm hot, so I'm just do what I do. It was completely necessary. Like I mentioned before, Shaq did not play well that series. Also, I want to give credit to Alonzo Mourning, 7 blocks in Game 6.
Ridiculous.
And also like the feeling of seeing him win one. Because like I said, I was a Heat fan before I knew what the NBA was. And it was because of Alonzo Mourning mostly. So seeing him get one, and knowing that my favorite player at the time was the main person responsible for it, it was just like, man, like I said, I can't describe that feeling.
Yeah, it felt like the passing of the baton, to be very honest. Like it felt like, all right, like Zoe gave him like this is the last one. This is literally all I have left in me. Like he came out after and he was like, yeah, that was the hardest I've ever played in my career. Because he was chasing that, that trophy. Because back then it wasn't as, I mean, I don't want to say it's easy now either, but like particularly depending on the teams, like it, it was definitely tougher. It was tougher. There wasn't as much stardom. It was a lot more reliant on, role players and roles and stuff like that. And that was, during the season where Pat took over Stan Van, like just the whole trajectory of that season starts in the most, like you stated, like just the most ridiculous way. And for them to persevere, for Wade to put the team on that, to even put him on that stage was special enough, and to capitalize and finish was more than anybody could have ever imagined, at least more than I could have ever imagined. Yeah.
So unfortunately, the season after was kind of a disaster. Like, obviously D Wade was great. Shaq was still kind of showing a decline. The rest of the guys just didn't have anymore. I won't even say didn't have anymore. They just like, there's like stories of like guys drinking a whole bunch, like being overweight, coming into camp just all messed up. Like it got bad. And 07 playoffs, they just were not the same team. They went against Chicago and just did not have it. It was a disaster. That was one of those series where I just stopped watching. Then the next season, Shaq he looks done. He ended up reviving himself for a little bit there in Phoenix, but it was rough. 08 was rough. And that's the year D Wade hurt his shoulder.
Yep.
And so I hated Shane Battier for years for that. But we ended up being a lottery team. That was the Michael Beasley, D Rose draft. I wanted D Rose on the Heat so damn bad. That was my only reason to watch the season. Just trying to imagine how D Rose would look with the Heat. And then the lottery comes. No, first, they trade Shaq for Shawn Marion. And I'm like, okay, this could be something. It ended up not being nothing at all. Yeah. But draft lottery comes, the Heat get the number 2 pick. This whole year, it's all Michael Beasley. Because he had an insane year in college.
Yep.
Combines happen. D Rose gets pushed up to number 1. I'm like, fuck. I'll take Michael Beasley, but D Rose goes number 1. Michael Beasley goes number 2. 08-09. No, the Olympics happened. The Redeem team. D Wade on a Redeem team comes off the bench and leads that team in scoring. This is the team that has Carmelo Anthony, that has Kobe Bryant, and he's coming off an injury, leads the team in scoring. Were you watching those games?
I was not watching the Redeem team. I cannot say I was.
There were crazy times. Like, I don't mean like crazy times is like the era. I mean like I was up at like 4 a.m. watching basketball. I don't think I'll ever do that again, but at the time I'm dedicated. But
yeah,
I say I have to say, D Wade goes into 08-09 and has a season where he, to this day, I feel like should have won MVP.
Yeah, that was, to be very honest, that was probably his best season ever. Yeah. At least in my opinion. That was during that year, it literally felt like nobody could touch him. Mm-hmm. Generally, like, it didn't matter the coverage you threw at him. It didn't matter who you threw at him. We stated, you could throw 2. It didn't matter. You could hedge. You could try to double the screen. It didn't matter. He was splitting, getting to the cup. If he was isoing you, that's when he started adding also like that I don't even know how, like the 18-footer between the 3-point line and back then that was spacing between the 3-point line and the top of the free throw circle. Mm-hmm. That's when he really started adding that. Everybody was like, stay down on the pumps. He started adding the post game. Like it almost felt like once he injured his shoulder, he was like, I gotta add something else to my game. And as if he was already easy to guard, I guess. Mm-hmm. He was like, nah, let's add different layers. And during that season, again, it wasn't just like, yes, he put up 30 points per game. Mm-hmm. Ridiculous. Nowadays, that's ridiculous. Imagine 15 years ago.
Right.
How ridiculous that is. When 100 points was like the median, like the goal was to get to 100 offensively. He was putting up 30% of those points.
Yeah.
But that's not even all. In my opinion, what made Wade special to me was his efficiency.
Yeah.
Shot 49% from the field. People are like sub 50%. Think about eras, think about position, think about size. 49% was absolutely absurd for somebody who was a shooting guard at that time. Mm-hmm. Somebody who really wasn't he wasn't really that was one of his best seasons shooting 3, shot like 32%. Like, that wasn't really his thing. Just absolutely dominating in literally every way possible that year.
Oh, 9-10 comes. I'm pretty tired of the team. They were fun, but we kind of just knew they weren't going to win with that team. But free agency is looming. There's speculation on TV. Well, LeBron could end up. I remember watching that All-Star game specifically, 2010, and it's Eastern Conference, so LeBron, Wade, and Bosh are playing together. And announcers keep saying it could be a preview of the future or whatever it is. I'm like, don't even tell me nothing like that. It makes no sense. This is not gonna happen. Star players don't leave their team in free agency. They don't team up. It doesn't make sense. I wish there was. I've gotten annoyed by it. Like the idea that LeBron James, Chris Bosh, and Dwyane Wade would play together just made no sense. And I wanted people to shut up about it because it wasn't going to happen. I didn't want to get my hopes up. July 8th, 2010. No, before that, Chris Bosh and Dwyane Wade go on ESPN, and they announced they're going to play together in Miami, which huge relief to me because if you remember,
oh my goodness,
there was a whole "We Want Wade" campaign in Miami. We thought he was gone.
Miami Wade County.
Mm-hmm. We thought he was gone because the team had been kind of sputtering. A lot of people don't remember how frustrated he was by the fact he had to average 30 in 09. He's not a numbers guy. He just wants to win. So we knew he was fed up with the losing. We knew the team as constructed wasn't really getting anywhere. So a lot of us were pretty terrified that he was gone. And there were the Chicago Bulls rumors that he was set to go there. He had met with them. He had never met with a team before in like ever. So we were worried. So he goes on ESPN with Chris Bosh, announced they're coming back. I'm satisfied with the summer. I'm good.
Yep.
July 8th, 2010. I remember because that's 2 days before my 18th birthday. I'm watching ESPN all day. Chris Broussard says it's going to be Miami. I'm like, why would I believe Chris Broussard?
Yep.
But it turned out it was Miami. We talked about this in the LeBron episode, but what was your reaction to that?
Just awe. Like it was, I remember just, it was like summer. I remember just calling my dad up every Chris Broussard update, just calling Pops, be like, yo, like he's coming, like LeBron's coming, like we're getting LeBron because like you stated, like before this, times were tough, but every time Wade played LeBron, like everybody's like, you know,
crazy
oh, they go back. They're like, yeah, like they're the best of friends and this and that. And like, you were like, okay, cool. But like what? And then once this happened, it was just like just generally shocked. Cause like you said, I was cool with just Chris Bosh.
Yeah.
To be honest, I was cool with just Amari and he wanted to come too.
Yeah.
But I was cool with somebody alongside Dwyane Wade. And supposedly, I don't know if this is true, but Chris Bosh was the reason Wade came over because Wade was going to pick Chicago, but Bosh was like, I want to play in Miami.
Yeah.
Hashtag state tax. Thank you, Pat Riley. But that's the whole it was one of the it was basically the reason that they all ended up teaming up together. But where were you specifically and what was your initial reaction? That must have been a hell of a birthday gift.
Yeah, I'm 17 years old at the time, just graduated high school because I was born in the summer. I'm sitting on my mom's couch in Alapata. I'm watching the decision, and if you don't remember, they took forever for the announcement. Like, all due respect to the kids in the Boys and Girls Club, but it was just a whole bunch of that. It was just a lot of they made us wait way too long.
Yep.
So LeBron finally goes into it. He says, next season, and then he paused and said, this is tough. I was like, so it's not Cleveland. And then he said, I'm taking my time to South Beach. The one time in my life, somebody referring to Miami as South Beach didn't piss me off. Yep. And to be completely honest, I don't remember anything else from there. I was too excited. My memory escapes me completely. Then we go to the event. Well, I go to the event with my friend Chris, who really was the only person who could go because it was like short notice. They sent the press release out like, hey, get a free ticket, go to this event. And we've already gone over how like that event itself is misinterpreted as like a party, whatever. It was just an introduction. But we go into that season, they're not dominant.
Nope.
They're not dominant. That season was when I actually committed to just not watching any more basketball coverage. And I paid no attention to basketball coverage for 8 years. That's why if you listen to this show, I have a lot of different, like, unique perspectives on stuff because I just had nobody else's perspective in my mind. It was that bad. So they end up turning it around. They get into the playoffs. They look like they should look. They go against the Mavs. Dwyane Wade has a Finals MVP type series. I don't want to get on LeBron a whole lot because I don't like bashing players, but I could just say I was pretty disappointed.
He struggled. It's the best way we can put it. He struggled, particularly later on in the fourth quarters of those games. He definitely struggled. But like you stated, Wade was definitely the alpha in that series for the Heat. The team was going as he was going. To be honest, the fit with him and Braun, we can they ended up winning 2 chips or whatever, but specifically, like, it wasn't a good fit specifically to start off with. It was a lot of clashing, not a lot of spacing. It was a lot of having to adjust to each other. These were 2 of the guys that were arguably 1 and 2, honestly, in terms of just not just ball dominance, but like scoring and obviously ball dominance at the time, and they just completely had to play off each other. So they were trying to find their roles, trying not to step on each other's toes. And with practically a rookie head coach, I mean, he wasn't really a rookie head, but this was like second year, third year, or third year Eric Spoelstra, still the youngest coach in the league at the time. Like, it was a lot of things that were meshing, a lot of egos, the media. I guess it all just got to everybody, but it did not get to Dwyane Wade. Everybody but him, to be very honest. He was still sensational in that final series, but they fell short.
Yeah, that's the best way to put it. They fell short. And then next season comes, now they're dominant. Now even though their games still kind of, there's overlap in their games, and Chris Bosh adjusting kind of helped with that fit as well. They're dominant this year. Iman Shumpert described that year as the year they just decided they were going to drive every time, and there was nothing other team could do about it. They ended up back in the finals against a young OKC team, and as much time as they had with KD, with Russ, with Harden, I kind of knew. I knew. Like, they were the favorites, just like they were against the Mavs, but OKC was just young. Yeah. I will say, though, Russell Westbrook with that mid-range pull-up was scaring me. It wasn't a close series, but that pull-up was scaring me. But they ended up getting it done. Now, this championship you're a little older for. What was your reaction to that?
It felt like, how can I say it? Like the biggest weight had been lifted off of the shoulders of Miami Heat fans.
Yeah.
Because like you stated, the media coverage, talk about scrutinizing generally every single thing that they could have done. Mm-hmm. Like, it was every second of every day was nitpicking what Wade, what Braun, what the big 3 were doing, what they weren't doing, why they were doing it, why they weren't good enough, why were they struggling? Because that entire run, they did the hard part in the beginning. Obviously, playing Indy, playing Boston to get to the finals that year, like playing Melo to get to the finals. Like, they went through the gauntlet. Like, people can say, oh, the East was weak. Not at this time. Like, not at this time. The Knicks having Melo and Amari, which was they're a great team with Tyson and Amon and JR and Jeremy Lin. Lin came a little later, but at the time, like, it was still a very, very talented team. All these, this team just getting overshadowed by the greatness of, what was Wade and Braun at the time. Indiana, sensational teams. Like, one of the toughest teams I personally can remember. Roy Hibbert at the time was a monster, especially against Miami. David West, Danny Granger, Paul George was coming into his own, giving them real fucking problems at the time. George Hill being a heady point guard. Darren Collison, shout out Darren Collison. We used to have to put in Norris Cole just to try to stop him. Yeah. It was that bad. But obviously getting through the hurdle that was Boston, the team that had eliminated them. Obviously, basically, to be honest, the team that brought them together. Like, if we want to be real honest as Heat fans, the team that beat Braun. And by the time they got to the finals, man, it was just, it felt like they had already done the hard part.
Yeah.
But that championship, like I said, just felt like the biggest weight off of my shoulders as a Heat fan, because I was just tired of hearing it from the media. Yeah. And then I imagine, shit, if it was off of mine, I can imagine what it was for them in unison, like watching Wade, one of his best friends win it, Bosh winning it for the first time, LeBron winning it for the first time, finally stepping into that, getting one for the conversation.
Yeah.
But it was otherworldly. Like generally, it was at the time it was otherworldly. It felt like for the first time they were validated as a victory. Because I believe that was the year they won 27 in a row. Maybe it was the following year.
That was the next year.
It was the next year. So it wasn't, exactly. So up until that point, they weren't validated yet. But this was like their validation was going through this gauntlet, getting to where they needed to get to after beating Boston in 7 games. I believe Indy was in 6 or 7 as well. Just a tough, like literally gauntlet of a playoff run to get to the finals. And when they got there, it was like, all right, we could take on these young guys. And took care of business.
And then the next season is dominance, just pure dominance. Defending champions, they had it figured out. By that time, Chris Bosh started shooting threes a little more.
Yep.
So teams really couldn't stop him.
Yep.
Because you got obviously Wade and LeBron, the pressure they put on the rim, and then you got Chris Bosh out there shooting threes. You got Mike Miller out there shooting threes. Shane Battier, very underrated 3-and-D player. Just like this team was dominant. And so I also knew they were going to win it that year. But kind of describe the feeling of watching that team and being in Miami, because by that time you are still in high school, I believe.
Yeah. So at that time, I want to say 2012, 2013. I was a freshman in high school. So that was my first year in high school. It was just I would keep to myself because I moved around a lot during high school. But like it was just me and like my dad every day just watching this team, getting accustomed to it, because it was all like it was must-see TV. Like I watch every game regardless. But during this thing, it was by far the most entertaining. And again, it wasn't an easy trip. But once they won those 27 games in a row, that was the year that the Harlem Shake video came out.
Yeah.
Birdman was fucking incredible that year.
Man,
like the team just felt better than it did the year before. How did you feel about the team heading into the playoffs? And then obviously as they started going through, Milwaukee was a breeze, but as they started going through like the Chicago, Indy, and then obviously as they played San Antonio.
I knew they were going to win it. I was more worried about Indy than anything, but I felt like Indy just still didn't have enough. I felt like they gave them great series every time, but that Heat team, nobody was going to stop that Heat team. And so my experience, I hadn't dropped out of college yet, so I'm at Miami-Dade College Wolfson campus, right across the street from the arena, ironically enough. But I'm a college dropout. By that time, I wasn't really paying much attention to it. So I was just spending a bunch of time at the arena, by the arena, all that stuff. But I say all that to say you could really, really feel how dominant that team was because I'm right there every day.
Yeah.
I'm in classes with arena employees. I'm over there. I'm at Bayside, which is across the street from the arena, if anybody doesn't know. I'm right there. So I knew like the team was too good. Like the energy of the city was just too strong. Like, it felt like they were going to win another championship. And I had already really seen 2. I just knew what the feeling was like. And so they ended up winning it. I was excited, obviously, because they beat the Spurs, and the Spurs are at the time still a dynasty in some sense. Yeah,
it was probably the craziest finals. And I know we're talking about Dwyane Wade in particular, but the Heat, up until that point, they hadn't really been down in the series.
Right.
But they get down to San Antonio 2-1. And not only was it 2-1, they got absolutely crushed.
Yeah.
Game 3. That was the real first time I felt like the team had gotten punched in the mouth since winning the chip.
Yeah.
Obviously, again, since the Dallas, that's what I'm talking about. So and lo and behold, game 4, who comes alive for Miami again? After he had been criticized that entire playoff run.
Yeah, because that's when the injuries had started, and he was like,
his knees were as good as gone at that point, to be very honest. He was having them drained before every single playoff game, like injected, taking pain injections before during the off days to reduce swelling. Like it was just his knees were already banged up. And Game 4, after they're down 2-1 in San Antonio, Dwyane Wade goes out there and puts up 32 points, 6 steals. Just genuinely 32 and then 25 back-to-back games, which they lost the next game. But just put on, again, like, back against the wall. Like, this is what his career was made out of. Like, people, get annoyed by the word heat culture. Sometimes it pisses me off too. But, like, he literally idolizes. Like, he is what it is to a T. Back against the wall, shit, you're going to do whatever it takes to win. And that was Dwyane Wade literally every time. But in particular, this series obviously has probably the greatest shot in NBA history in terms of a finals with the Ray Allen 3 in Game 6. But just all the little things, man. He was still able to produce with basically one knee out the door at that point.
Yeah. And so the next year, so the previous years, I felt like they were going to win it, and they did. 13, 14, was the first time I had questions. Because like we mentioned, D-Wade's injuries, the knees weren't getting much better. And that team just kind of looked like a team that had, I don't want to say ran it. Well, they looked like they kind of ran its course. Like they just kind of looked like they weren't together anymore. And it showed on the court sometimes. They still had enough time to get to the finals, but I just really, no matter what, I didn't feel like anybody was beating the Spurs twice in a row.
Yeah, it felt like a team that, like you said, ran its course. Like they were just kind of done with each other, to be very honest. They're already a little bit older. Everybody was, like, the role players had gotten old. Like there wasn't an influx of young talent at the time into them. It was just it was a tough season because it was the beginning of, well, that's kind of what it was starting to feel like. It kind of just started feeling like the beginning of the end, to be honest.
Yeah.
In terms of the peak years for Miami, and it ended up being, at least during Wade's tenure, it ended up being quite literally, that was it.
Yeah. And we don't even have to get into that, honestly, because I'm gonna be honest with you. I was so frustrated. I didn't even watch most of those finals. Like I knew what it was. And I tell people this all the time, and I sound crazy when I'm fully aware of how crazy I sound when I say it. But I had a feeling LeBron was leaving, and I kind of accepted it. Because the same way the team must have felt about each other, I kind of felt the same way. And it's crazy, but I just felt like they had reached their ceiling, and it was kind of going down from there. So when LeBron left, I wasn't shocked, and I wasn't angry either.
Yeah, I wasn't angry. People were burning his jersey. That was, come on now.
Yes.
We had one chip in, like, I believe it was like 20 years before he came here. And we got 2 in back-to-back seasons, or 2 in 4 years. Like, there's no reason to burn that man's jersey. There's no reason to hate anybody on that team. They did one of the hardest things to do in the NBA twice. Once LeBron left, that next season, the 2014-2015 season, had a complete different feel to it, it felt like. Wade was obviously still declining, but it almost felt like he was freed just a little bit more, but he just didn't have it. And that was the first time where at least in my opinion, I was like, damn, what's up next? Because I already knew, but by this time I was really into contracts. Like I was like, his contract's running up next year. He was at the time, and to this day, he was the greatest Heat player, obviously ever. But I was like, is he worth the money? Are they going to pay him? We saw what the Lakers had done with Kobe up until that point, and what kind of hole it caused them. And, it was the first time that I was just genuinely like, I don't even, like, retirement was even brought up already. I mean, to be honest, retirement was brought up during LeBron's last year here. So at this point, it was already like rumored, 2-3 times.
Yeah,
And it was
his knees
just
were that bad.
Yeah, his knees were that shot. And so kind of want to know how you felt the year after LeBron left, then Chris Bosh gets a blood clots, like just a bunch of horror. I felt like the 2 good years turned into like 5 really bad years, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But
I was definitely concerned because D-Wade's knees weren't right. And then the Chris Bosh blood clots happened. So it's like, all right, well, I guess we got to just look at the draft again. They end up getting Justice Winslow. They come in next season, I believe, is when they get Goran Dragic. And they make it to the playoffs. They make it to the playoffs. D-Wade gives us that vintage performance in Charlotte, purple shirt guy.
Yep.
And he's still not D-Wade anymore, but he's capable of giving us moments. They end up playing against Toronto and losing. Free agency comes. I know how I felt. I wasn't sad. I felt I didn't burn any jerseys or anything, but I felt probably the same way Cleveland fans felt when LeBron left, except in the back of my mind, I understood it because he did pay Hassan Whiteside over Dwyane Wade.
Yeah. It's crazy because I was like, if he wants to leave, let him leave. But it was the fact that they paid Hassan Whiteside that really bothered me at the time. It bothered me more than Wade leaving because it just felt like at some point he was going to go back to where he came from. He ended up embracing Miami and Miami embraced him, but realistically he grew up in Chicago. It just even during the 20 we didn't even touch on that's where he wanted to go. That's the only other place he had a free agent meeting with realistically that had any chance of materializing. And if it wasn't for Bosh, like we said, he would have probably gone there according to himself and to Chris. So it was him going to Chicago felt like part of my heart was leaving with me. Just honestly, it was that bad. I was like, it basically felt like that literally the team just controlled, alt deleted, and restarted from scratch. And by far one of the toughest times, and even still at 35, because this isn't just Wade in Miami. This is Wade throughout his career. At 35, does Dwyane Wade things in terms of they get to the playoffs. They're an 8 seed playing against the 1st seed, and they start off, shout out Rajon Rondo, shout out Jimmy Butler, shout out Dwyane Wade. They ended up giving it to him 2 games in a row prior to Rondo's injury. But that they had, I believe it was the Hawks, wasn't it? During that 2016, 2007. Yeah, they had, it was Boston. Sorry. They had Boston flustered. They were down 2-0. They took both games at Boston, and Wade was 35 at the time, still doing what he always did to Boston, giving them buckets.
And for me, I didn't even watch that series because it
felt wrong.
My anger had gone away, but it was just awkward. It was to this day, it's awkward just seeing Dwyane Wade in another jersey. I can't really explain it. It just felt out of place. But then he goes to Cleveland. I also don't remember any of that. I didn't watch that.
Talk about out of place.
And that team was a disaster.
That felt out of place. They brought him to a sinking ship.
Yeah. And so then trade deadline comes when he's in Cleveland. My friend, shout out to Trap, he just sends a text to the group chat. It just says, because there's a trade deadline, stuff is going. It says, Wade to Miami. I'm thinking he's joking. He don't usually joke like that, but I'm thinking he's joking. And then I saw the Woj bomb. So I know when you saw the Woj bomb, what did you think?
It felt like all was right again. It felt like, because for a couple years there, the relationship had kind of soured with Pat Riley, particularly for Dwyane, obviously because of choosing Hassan over him. but it felt like all went right back to where it used to be. Like it felt like it was like that family member you hadn't seen in a long time, and you were just rekindled, and everything was good again, no matter through whatever hardships both of y'all went through. It felt like it took them get splitting apart to get closer,
Mm-hmm.
and both have some more appreciation for each other, honestly, and for what each of them brought.
Yeah.
Do you in particular, do you remember Dwyane Wade's first game back?
Yeah, I could tell the story of that day. So
Please do.
because I dropped out of school. I dropped out of college multiple times. I think this is one of the semesters I was dropped out. I was off work, and I understand this is late in the podcast. I could kind of say this. There is the E when you click on the podcast there, but I'm not going to get that explicit. But I had just come from visiting a friend's house while their parents were off at work. I'm going back to my house I didn't have work. I was going back to my house. That was when I got the text way back to Miami. I get home. I'm like, you know what? The Heat play tonight. I should look at how much these tickets cost. They were still pretty cheap because the trade had just happened. So I was like, I'm going to buy a ticket right now before these prices skyrocket. And I told my friends to do the same thing. By the time they went, the prices were way too high. So I got lucky. I was able to get in. I went by myself. They were playing against the Bucks. I get in the arena, and the energy is crazy, as you can imagine. So if you've been to a Heat game, you know sometimes they'll show like inside the tunnel while the team is there, right? The camera caught a glimpse of the back of D Wade's head, and the crowd went crazy. They come out, and they're doing a little layup line thing. On every Dwyane Wade layup, you would think he hit a clutch shot in the playoffs. It was like
insane.
And they go to do the intro video, and they had been doing this intro video all year. It was to Lights Camera Action by Mr. Cheeks. It was like they'll show like Josh Richardson, Kelly Olynyk, like the team. Like they showed like a split second, like they had added D Wade. I guess they filmed it. They added a split second of D Wade's like face, like smiling in the same lighting and all that stuff. Arena went crazy, right? And mind you, this is Bam's rookie year also, and Bam's hardly playing, but he's on that run where he'll come into a game, do something crazy, and never play again.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Right. So the game starts. D Wade is coming off the bench. Like 30 seconds into the game, we started with the "We Want Wade" chants. But Spo is Spo. He's not listening. He's like, he let a few more minutes go by. D Wade stands up before he even starts walking to the scores table. You'll think they just won a championship the way the crowd was and the way the energy was. They do the introduction, whatever it is. D Wade actually didn't have that great of a game.
No, it was a bad one, to be honest.
He didn't have a good game, but he blocked a shot at some point. The crowd went crazy for I mostly feel like, as far as the basketball wise, I realized Bam was playing an unusual amount of minutes that game, which I felt like what happened because they had been in the media already. I think the trade deadline had passed, and basically they had made it known Bam was untouchable already, and he wasn't even playing at the time really. But I kind of knew. Well, I figured out pretty early on why he was playing that much was to kind of see how they could fit him with D Wade. And I remember him, he got a catch block on Chris Middleton. He had like a windmill after the buzzer after the game. So like you could obviously see the team was excited too.
Yep.
Then they go ahead, they make the playoff run. No, I don't want to skip over a bunch of this stuff. I think the couple games later is when he hit the game winner over Ben Simmons.
Yep, against Philly, correct. Against
Philly. Then they go into the playoffs and they lose. That Philly team was very good. I'm gonna be honest with you.
That Philly team was. They were really, really good, to be very honest.
But it just felt great to have D Wade back. I didn't care too much about that. Then the next season, going into the next season is when he announced it was going to be his last season. He was retiring from the league. He called it The Last Dance before the documentary came out, The Last Dance. the way I felt was, first of all, I can't believe I just watched somebody's whole career. Because like the first player who retired that I saw get drafted was Amari Stoudemire, but I like those Suns teams. I wasn't as invested as I was in obviously Dwyane Wade's career. So I kind of couldn't. I knew his age. I knew the injury stuff. It was surreal though, like that was going to be his last season. So I want to know your experience with that.
So I had a different experience, I would say, than just about most Heat fans or just most Wade fans in general. I worked at the arena practically since 2017 for like 5 years there. So my experience there was completely different. I got to see Dwyane Wade every day. It felt like at least every day that he was in the arena, I was, in some capacity near him. And just the energy, man, to be very honest, like the way he loved the city, the way he embraced the city, the way the city embraced him. Like everything you said was to a T during his return. I remember being courtside and it was like, damn, like you would have thought, like you said, you would have thought they won a championship, man. Like it was that level of intense. It was like just that level of like, damn, like he's back. Like our son is back. Like that's literally what it felt like. But during that last season, it was, he had already transitioned, basically entirely to a bench role at the time. And, he was obviously a lot slower, but it was like every game felt like you were just one step away from the movie finishing and you just never wanted it to end.
Right.
I want to ask you in particular, because I have a pretty cool story on the last Miami Heat game at the arena. Because if I'm not mistaken, they finished the season off at Brooklyn, which is when he had his triple-double with the last pass to UD. But his last game at the arena itself, which was also against Philly, and that ended up winning. During that game, like, is there anything that stood out to you while you were maybe watching the stream or, watching the game on broadcast about like the way he was legitimately just embraced on his practically his last game with the Heat?
And so really there was a build-up because that whole season, what kind of not surprised me, but I was kind of taken back by was it wasn't just us he had this impact on. Like seeing with the jersey swaps and how many players grew up idolizing D Wade, whether you talk about the Terry Roziers, the Bradley Bills, like I didn't know that. going into the season, I had no idea. So it wasn't, obviously it was mostly us growing up in Miami, but that was a big deal for me to actually see. And then the last game, like, fuck, I wish I went. I planned on going. I forgot why I didn't go, but I ended up going to a bar and watching it and just seeing, like you said, the crowd and the you could feel the appreciation through the screen, basically. And so I know you worked at the arena. You was most likely there. Like, what was your experience with it?
Man, people were in tears.
Yeah.
Like, genuinely, like everybody. It felt like the most, I can't relate to it because I don't have kids. I haven't seen anybody graduate. Like, it wasn't like, it didn't feel, I don't know what it felt like, but in terms of like a comparison, but it felt like somebody, like it was tears of joy, sadness, tears of overwhelm, just emotions. That day they put, we helped set up like all the seats. So it said, I want to say it said, wow, or because at the time it was a Way of Wade thing. So it said, wow.
Yeah, I remember that.
Like everything set up. They gave out these like booklets of his whole career. Essentially, I took like 6 home. And the front cover was a hardcover where when you moved it, it went from him with 1 ring to him with 2 to him with 3 rings. And just everything he meant to the franchise. That's probably the most money Mickey Harrison ever spent on giveaways.
Yeah.
But it was like the most it was like the most just felt like it just felt right. It was the most right that it had felt since his return. Honestly, it was like the perfect bow to put on that gift that was his career to NBA fans across the world. I don't want to just say Heat fans because like you stated, the Roziers, Bradley Beals, the Kevin Herters, the Jimmy Butlers, like people that you generally would have like, you know, and shout out to him for giving some of these lesser known players at the time. Kevin Herter was a rookie. Rozier had just started really coming onto the scene. Obviously we know who Bradley Beal is, but it was plenty of countless amount of players who were just not really as known. It didn't really affect, like, the person that he was way deeper than basketball. And you can feel his fingerprints across the entire generation.
Yeah.
And it was a thing of beauty to watch at the arena. The halftime was one of the most saddest halftimes I had been a part of, because it felt like every time the clock ticked, people were just like another tear and another. Like it was honestly a surreal experience for sure.
Yeah. So I want to, well, for one, he ends up retiring after the Brooklyn game, obviously. Triple-double. He gets his jersey retired. They announced earlier in the season he's getting a statue. Very well deserved.
Crazy.
Very well deserved. I can't wait to fly back down home and see it when it's up. I'm going to ask you this final question, and I know it's kind of a loaded question, but what exactly overall did Dwyane Wade mean to you growing up?
Damn. It was a lot, man. It was for sure. It was the first time you felt a connection to an athlete. At least in my opinion, that was the first time I felt a connection to an athlete of that caliber. As silly as it sounds, he made you want to be better every day, because just seeing his greatness, just inspired, honestly, inspired. To be very honest, it got me into loving basketball the way I love it to this day. It got me to break down the nuances as much as I do to this day. Seeing how basically a player spent damn near, it was like 16 seasons of his career without one of these shots, you know, without having like just basically, it made me focus on, like, you know, it doesn't matter what you do bad in life, right? Focus on your strengths and you should be good to go. Have blinders on and should just follow suit. Like, you know, go to work every day. And that's from the basketball perspective. Once I got to the arena and I got to see him as a person, it completely changed my perspective. It was, no matter how much money you can get, how much fame you can have, at the end of the day, he's still a human. And it felt like he cared about every single person in that arena like they were his family. And every single person at the arena treated Dwyane Wade, whether they knew him or not, like he was family. Because at that point, to be very honest, Dwyane Wade was Miami. Like,
100%.
We talked about the transition way early on. This is 2003, 2004 at the start of the podcast, about how it was the first time Miami was anything but a football city. And, you know, 2003, anything but a baseball city. And it's remained like that for 21 years, thanks to Dwyane Wade.
Yeah. So for me personally, I grew up idolizing D Wade.
Yep.
Because I played basketball, like, point blank, like, this was somebody I idolized. And for me, there was a lot of pride, there's hometown pride, and then I have even more than hometown pride, because, and it goes back to why I hate when people refer to Miami as South Beach, because that's not the area I'm from. I'm not from South Beach. I'm not from Coral Gables. I'm not from these areas you would see, and Miami gets this reputation because of those areas as a glitz and glam city. And that's not where I'm from. That's not what Miami is. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people just look at South Beach and think, oh, it's all palm trees and beaches and peace. I'm from Liberty City. That's not the case over there. I'm gonna apologize. I used to say you were from Hialeah. You lived in Hialeah. You're from Carroll City.
Yeah, most of my life I definitely lived in Carroll City, but I went to school in Hialeah.
So our experiences, I know for me at least, there's kind of a chip on my shoulder.
Yeah,
because when I tell people I'm from Miami, they assume I'm from the Miami they see on TV, and that's really not the case. But I say all that to say, Dwyane Wade, with the way he played, he embodied what Miami actually is. All the things you mentioned, the blue collar stuff, the resilience, like growing up in Liberty City, like you have to be resilient. You have to be tough. You have to be able to get up when you get knocked down, because whether it's the economics, whether it's the environment, whether it's two of my 8th grade classmates got killed. So like whether it's overcoming stuff like that, D-Wade embodied those things through a sport. And it's difficult to even describe that to somebody who doesn't understand it. And even the commercials, the fall 7 times, stand up 8, his whole thing, and like you said, his whole career basically was defined by succeeding with your back against the wall. And so seeing that as a kid from Liberty City, it's impossible not to idolize somebody like that. You know what I mean? So once again, congratulations to Dwyane Wade on the jersey retirement, on the retirement in general. And I can't wait to see the statue. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Playoff File. I'm Kenny. My social media, KennySpenceNBA. But follow and subscribe to Playoff File. That's all I care about. I don't care if you follow me on Twitter, to be honest with you. Follow the show wherever you consume the show. Lou, where could they find you at?
Find me on Twitter, on TikTok at SaucyTakes. Saucy takes no spaces with the Z at the end. I'm trying to get to 500 followers. The podcast trying to get to 500 subscribers. Let's make it happen, people. We appreciate every single person that's been listening, and stay tuned for more because we're working at this thing for sure.
Yeah, we got some interesting stuff coming up. If you like the music throughout, that's my brother. His Instagram and TikTok is BlackGlowMusic. You could also download his EPs, and we'll see y'all next time.